I'm Huon Hooke, and this is The Real Review. The wine we're tasting today is Petaluma Hanlin Riesling 2020 from the Clare Valley. Petaluma is a company name well known to Australian wine drinkers. I think the Riesling was the first wine that they ever produced or that they ever were famous for. And I can remember back in 1979, the first Petaluma Riesling I ever tasted, and it's still seared on my memory because it made such a huge impression on me. Petaluma, of course, began around about that time. In fact, 1979, Brian Croser planted the Tears vineyard in the Adelaide Hills, which later went on to produce great Chardonnay. But before that, he'd bought this vineyard in the Clare Valley, which is the area where he grew up, where he was born and raised, and turned it into Petaluma's Riesling vineyard, which he named Hanlin Hill. And ever since then, it's been the source of this wine. And even the label has not changed at all. The packaging, the brown bottle, the black capsule, everything is the same, except it's now a screw cap instead of a cork, which it was in the early days. This vineyard is just east of the Clare township, up in the northern half of the region, and it's quite high altitude. It's something over 450 metres, I believe. And Petaluma is now not owned by Croser anymore. In fact, it's part of the Accolade Group, which is part of the biggest wine company in Australia, or one of the two biggest wine companies in Australia, whichever way you look at them, Vineyards Production, the other one being Treasury, but Accolade, I believe, is the biggest seller of wine in Australia. Now, this is what Brian Croser called a traditional Australian dry, late-picked Riesling. So I think what he meant by dry is that, by late picked, is it's picked quite ripe compared to some of the traditional styles of Europe. For example, the German wines, which are all picked at much lower sugar levels, except for the very sweet wines. So 13.5% alcohol for this particular wine, which is quite high for a Riesling. But the wine, I think we'll find when you taste it, has great delicacy. So, what does this wine taste like, this Petaluma Hanlin Hill Riesling 2020? A very pale straw colour, as you'd expect. It's a very young wine. The aroma, pungent. It really leaps out of the glass. It's got a powerful, intense, very fresh, very vibrant aroma. And the thing that it reminds me most of at the moment, today, depends what temperature and how much air you give it and so on, but right now it smells like the pith of a freshly peeled piece of citrus, either possibly a lemon perhaps, but it may be even a grapefruit. That citrus pith aroma is quite intense. If you think really hard, you can imagine the peel, you can imagine the juice of the lemon as well, all sorts of, not just lemon, but other various types of citrus aromas come through there. It is very fresh, very clean, pristine wine. It's not a complex wine, not yet anyway, but it will be as it develops in the bottle with some age. Let's taste it. Really remarkable penetrating flavour there. Really sears an impression on your tongue beautifully. I mean, it sounds painful, but in fact it's actually delicious and very appetizing. That fresh aftertaste with the cleansing acidity, that very pristine, delicate, youthful fruit flavour. Wow, that is really smart stuff. And the aftertaste goes on and on and on. I mentioned before that it's 13.5% alcohol. There is nothing about that wine that suggests that it's too big or too lacking in finesse or elegance. It is a gorgeous wine. So how do we rate this wine? I think I've already given the impression that we were pretty impressed by it. Scored at 96 out of 100, which is a high gold ribbon score, perhaps even a trophy-winning score. It was rated the number one wine out of 33 Rieslings from the Clare Valley that we tasted in the 2020 vintage, which obviously means it's a top-ranked rating. Gorgeous wine, and we recommended drinking it from now till 2035. So another 14, 15 years, this wine should have absolutely no problem lasting the distance, and it will just become more and more complex, more and more darker yellow in colour and more mouth-filling and more multi-layered in flavour and aroma the longer it ages. We always ask the winemaker what he or she would like to serve with their wine. And this wine, Mike Mudge is the chief winemaker at Petaluma, and he says, and I quote, "Because of the high acidity, I really like Riesling with spicy foods such as spicy dumplings." Probably he means Chinese dumplings of some sort, or seafood such as ceviche, fish, which means cured fish, cured in citrus, as it works well with the chili and the lime. I think that's an outstanding suggestion, Mike, and an interesting suggestion, because chili is not always what you might think of when you think of matching food with Riesling, but in a small way, in a subtle way, chili would work very well. And in Thai flavours, of course, when you put it with lime, it goes beautifully. Lime and mint and all of those things, a bit of maybe even some grapefruit segments in there as well. With your raw fish or your cured fish, it would be wonderful indeed. Cheers to that.